episode of the Cozy Corner of Cinema. This is episode number. What episode is it? 181, being recorded on Tuesday, September 16th, 2025, at 7:15 p.m. on a surprisingly chilly night. As we start getting into the cooler weather with, these beautiful sunny days and these chilly kind of fall and winter nights. These are just great opportunities to stay inside, catch up on some reading, watch some films, work on your artistic endeavors. Whatever it is, man, just really taking advantage of these days and not just rushing to the end of the week being like, oh man, well, hey, Friday's almost here, or hey, man, my work week's almost here. Just really kind of cherishing every single day and, cherishing the people in your lives as well and cherishing everything around you, because things are just, life is just so incredible to live, and we often can get lost in the myriad kind of non sequiturs, really kind of these small things that build up and snowball. But being able to take a step back and go like, wow, this is really incredible to be here, just to be alive at this moment. I get to experience this great art. I get to watch these great films and listen to this great music and associate with just really, truly wonderful people. It's just something that really cannot be taken for granted and taken advantage of. We got to take advantage of the situation. I got to say, whatever it is you got to work on, just working on it full force and putting your all into it, man. That's great. And so the other night, I finally ended up watching a documentary that I've been wanting to see for a little while, and it seemed timely with the release of the upcoming Megadoc. I watched Hearts of Darkness, a filmmaker's apocalypse, and it came to mind because I had watched that Charlie Sheen documentary on Netflix, and there's a part where, well, of course, Martin Sheen, the father of Charlie Sheen, they talk a little bit about Apocalypse Now at one point. And they play a clip from Hearts of Darkness, and I went, "Oh yeah, that's such a famous film that I haven't seen." And Apocalypse Now, of course, is just one of the great, just the great films, just total masterpiece. Coppola's. Not even quite as magnum opus, but in terms of production, it very well could have been. But then again, I guess you could say the same thing maybe about Megalopolis. But anyways, this seemed appropriate to watch with that documentary coming out this weekend. At the time of this recording, I'll be able to see it this weekend, and I'll talk about it. I'm looking forward to that. But famous documentary from 1991. Directed by primarily, I believe, Eleanor Coppola, partially based on the actual story of Heart of Darkness, which is where the title gets its name from, and it's just about the evolution of Coppola's production on Apocalypse Now, the nightmarish production trying to work on this film, working out in, I think it was the Philippines that he made this, and the hectic production, the weather not cooperating, the cast not cooperating, Marlon Brando famously being difficult to work with, even though, you look back, excuse me, my gosh, you look back at Coppola essentially reviving his career in '72 with The Godfather, whereas at that point, Brando, was falling out of favor, doing a lot of not so great films. Comes back into the spotlight with not only The Godfather, but Last Tango in Paris the same year, and that film deemed to be critically acclaimed, but also very controversial for myriad reasons. But either way, you get Brando back into the spotlight, and it brings up a whole new part of his career. But then, ironically, how difficult he was to work with on Apocalypse Now, how he hadn't read anything that Coppola had prepared, and really it's just everything kind of against him. It's funny having just recently rewatched Jaws, and I watched that Disney Plus Jaws at 50 documentary, and a lot of that information I'd already known. I mean, Jaws was another kind of famous hellish production. You have this young Steven Spielberg, and making this film, and everything's going wrong, and these are like big swings that these filmmakers are doing. Coppola has that sort of he has the goodwill with the studio, in making The Godfather 1 and 2, and them allowing him to make the conversation, and but just how big and how over budgeted this film got. Ultimately winning the Palme d'Or, tied with the Tin Drum that same year, and one of the few times it's ever happened where there's been two Palme d'Or winners at the Cannes Film Festival. And of course Spielberg, being so young, he'd only done a couple of films at that point, most famously, Duel, which is a terrific film, and then The Sugarland Express, which I haven't actually seen yet. Funnily enough, I have that on 4K, but that'll be watched at some point. But just these massive kind of productions, just a totally different landscape of filmmaking when studios would really kind of just take risks on these younger kind of filmmakers. And even Coppola, who was a little bit older at that point, but just allowing him to kind of go out into the jungle and make this sort of insane, kind of crazy film. And it's an incredible film. I mean, and it goes without saying, Apocalypse Now and Jaws ultimately end up both becoming, classics of their own type. And so, the production pays off and really kind of, I would say more so for Spielberg, kind of cements him into the mainstream. Because then he goes on to, I believe he follows it up with Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which is also an exceptional film. But Coppola at this point, ends his 70s run with four just absolutely brilliant films. And then, he has the eras of his career are so fascinating in that, he does a lot of films, and I think most of them are actually good to great. He doesn't have a whole lot that I don't like. He has, and I haven't seen all of his films, so I really can't say for sure. But let's go through them briefly. It'll be fun. So let me get a separate list, and we'll talk about these really briefly. And stuff like Battle Beyond the Sun, I'm not going to count. Or The Terror, I'm not going to count because he's really not the sole director on that. And I guess actually even The Bellboy and The Playgirls, which I have seen, I guess probably wouldn't count. Let's just start off with Dementia 13. Ironically, the one I have not seen. I know it's a famous film, notably for that, it's Coppola's sole feature debut. Although he did something called Tonight for Sure, from 1962, co-directed with Jerry Schaffer. Or Schaefer. So let's just credit that to Dementia 13 for now. But he does You're a Big Boy Now, which is good. Finian's Rainbow, which is good. The Rain People, which is very good. And then the next four, just total masterpieces. The Godfather, The Conversation, The Godfather Part 2, and Apocalypse Now. One from the Heart, which is good. I talked about that a little while ago on the show. Hammett, which it says he's uncredited for, so truthfully I'm not exactly sure what is up with that. It's credited to primarily Wim Wenders, interestingly enough. I'm not really familiar with that film, but it does The Outsiders, which is good. Rumblefish, which is great. The Cotton Club and Captain EO, both of which I have not seen. Peggy Sue Got Married, which is good. And then the next couple I haven't seen, which are Gardens of Stone, and Tucker, The Man in His Dream. I've actually had a couple opportunities to see Tucker, The Man in His Dream, but I haven't taken up on that. The Godfather Part 3, which isn't very good, but it's not terrible. Dracula, which I remember liking enough. And then, actually, funnily enough, these next stretch, so I guess I've seen less than what I thought, because then he does Jack the Rainmaker, Youth Without Youth. Those I've not seen, but then he does Tetro, which I've talked about before on the show, which I think is just one of his strongest films, and it's really kind of a shame that's been sort of lost in the later part of his career with Vincent Gallo and Alden Ehrenreich, who he was just in. He was just in Weapons. That's one. He was really good in Weapons. So I really like Tetro, and I'd love for a Criterion or a boutique label to pick that film up and give it to a new audience. I haven't seen Twixt, which I hear isn't very good, and then his newest film at the time of this recording, Megalopolis, which I have talked about many times on the show before. I wonder if that is a record for how many times I have talked about a film on a show, because I've brought up Megalopolis so much, and it's because I am endlessly fascinated, and I think it is such a breath of fresh air in contemporary big budgeted kind of theatrical films. It's one that it was just like, boy, it doesn't all work, but I'm still talking about it a year later. When did I see this? Was this in September of 2024? I don't even know. I think it may have been. I don't know. Either way, I'm endlessly fascinated by it. And I think that this is just one of the great not even just making a documentary making a movie, but just a great inspirational documentary that when everything, and I mean everything, is against you, and even you don't believe in yourself and your artistic, creative endeavors, to always push through till the end, because you never know what's going to come of that. Because if Coppola gives up on Apocalypse Now, what happens? Maybe somebody else takes over, they reconstrue it, and they miss all the nuances, they miss, the points. And that's what I love about him in this film. He talks about how he's too far into it. He can't back down. Now, much in the same way in Apocalypse Now, you have these group of guys who are going deeper and deeper into the jungle, and as Coppola has said it multiple times, it's sort of like they're time traveling, going back in time to something more primitive and something more bestial. I always thought that word should have been bestial. That makes more sense, doesn't it? But bestial doesn't sound right. But anyways, it's just one of the great filmmaking documentaries. I really have no issues with it. It's one that, because I'm such a fan of Apocalypse Now, I'm like, oh man, I can't believe I haven't seen Hearts of Darkness, like such a essential documentary. And between this and I just love documentaries about people's creative processes, or filmmakers like this. I was talking a couple months ago about one of my favorite things that I've watched this year, which is Boobs, Blood, and Beast, about Don Dohler and his films, and sort of a more at that point, I think that was like 2005, maybe that came out, sort of contemporary look at an independent kind of filmmaker who, at that point, with Don Dohler, who has already been established, who had been doing films for 20 years, but still, ultimately, sometimes there isn't that light at the end of the rainbow, and ultimately, you as an artist, you listening, have to decide how far you're willing to take it for your art, and Hearts of Darkness falls right into that conversation. So a worthy watch, man. Just a really, really exceptional film, and I just one of my favorite things I've watched this year. But I think it's pretty well known. I don't think you really need to say it. And I guess also briefly with the AKA Charlie Sheen. I won't talk too much about it. I did watch it on Netflix, and it wasn't bad. It was an interesting look at Charlie Sheen's life and career. Part 1 being about the rise, Part 2 being about the fall. And it brings to mind. It's one of these documentaries where it brings to mind other films to watch with it. It's the kind of documentary that you watch and you go, "Oh man, I gotta." You start to write down film. You start to write down films like, Platoon and Wall Street, and these great films. And there was no mention of Men at Work, unfortunately. At least I don't think so. Which is actually one of my favorite of his work. It's a very funny movie, but there is quite a little bit of time devoted to Grizzly 2, which is very funny, which I have not seen. Grizzly 1, I don't think is very good, and I know that Grizzly 2 is very kind of boxed and slapped together. But I did find it funny that I popped on Netflix recently, and I canceled Netflix. I'm just running out the days on that, but I popped it up. Or it popped up as Grizzly 2, and I was like, what a strange film for Netflix to feature on the front page, and then realizing after the fact that it was because of the Charlie Sheen documentary, so maybe I'll watch Grizzly 2 at some point, but it is not a priority. Grizzly, it's funny, speaking about Jaws before, in the wake of Jaws, all of the killer animals movies that were coming out of the late 70s into the 80s, not even just aquatic animals, just the straight Jaws ripoffs, of orca and alligator, piranha, and then, not even talking about all just the shark ones, the Last Shark, Cruel Jaws, Deep Blood, it's funny, you could probably just make a whole list about what are actually some of the best ones of those, and I think some of the best ones of those include Alligator, written by John Sayles, Orca, which I think is really good. It's such a wild film. It's basically just a revenge film against this orca, and this orca ruining the local economy of this town because the main fella in that film ended up killing the baby orca, and it's a grisly sequence, but no pun intended. But it's a good film as well. I think Charlotte Rampling's in that film, which is very funny to see. You think of her as kind of like a higher brow sort of actress, although she did do some stuff like The Night Porter, which actually, funnily enough, I did recently watch. Let me get a sip of this. I'll talk about it in a second. On Tubi, fascinating documentary called Fascism on a Thread, exploring the rise and fall, more so the rise, less about the fall, of the Nazisploitation films that came out of the 60s and the 70s. It's a good look at a type of film that I haven't actually seen a lot of. There's a lot of films they mention this. Of course, I've seen the Ilsa films, even the fourth one, which I don't know if it's technically canon or not. I think the one's I forgot the name of it. I think Tiger Huntress is like the third or the fourth one. I don't remember. But they mention other stuff like Love Camp 7. The Beast in Heat, Gestapo's Last Orgy, just a lot of really, really wild films. And it kind of gets into the psychology, the exploitive nature of these films without kind of looking down on these films. Because I think ultimately what would have been a turnaway is if there had been some kind of moral grandstanding against these films. But the people being interviewed, they're fully aware of what's going on here. These films are not meant to educate, are not meant to show any kind of nuance or any sort of historical context to any of these kinds of atrocities. They're there to shock. You watch these films and it's just like you take the most extreme kind of imagery of Nazis and these horrific experiments and these camps, and you're taking it less from a historically accurate point of view and more so about just crazy stuff. Like if you guys ever saw The Beast in Heat, that's just such a crazy film, and it's one that even Gestapo's Last Orgy is just such a strange film as well. I don't know if that one. I mean, I know that one is known, but as much as The Beast in Heat, I really don't know. But yeah, it's a good film to kind of look at this whole era of films. And actually, I know Ilsa is coming to Blu-ray or 4K. I think it's coming to 4K actually, either this month or next month from Kino, because that was one that those films were out of print for a while. They never came to Blu-ray. And I actually have a four film Blu-ray bootleg, because it was one of those where it was just like, oh man, these are not coming to Blu-ray anytime soon. Maybe the subject matter, people probably don't want to, maybe a little bit too touchy. They don't want to do that. But yeah, no, it's great. They're at least the first one's coming coming out. I don't know about the sequels. But Ilsa is just such a. I mean, it's the most popular of these kinds of films. But again, I mean, it's sort of like with these kinds of films, you really can't take them too seriously. I mean, you can look at it and say these films are exploitive and they're taking, a horrific part of history and making cheap entertainment out of it. And you're not even wrong. But I think ultimately it kind of, when it comes to films like this, I always have the mindset if you kind of have to take it, one, at face value, and then two, in context. Because if these films are coming out in the 70s, they're trying to, they're jumping on a wave, and they're all coming out and being, crazier than the last. It's sort of like, yeah, they're exploitive and schlocky, but it's also like, these are also filmmakers who are trying to, either push buttons or get your attention of just like, wow, this is, before the internet where you can click on whatever crazy thing you want to. It's like, oh my gosh, what is this movie? What is Ilsa? What is, Love Camp 7? What is Gestapo's Last Orgy? You have to go to the cinema and you're like shocked and horrified. You're like, wow, man. So yeah, I mean, it's important not to take these films very seriously. They are just dumb exploitation. It's not even enjoyable like you're enjoying the act, but it's more so like they're just so silly and they're so over the top, and they're not even remotely interested in any kind of historical accuracy. You kind of have to watch it as is. It's just an exploitation film. And this documentary is very good for showing off a lot of this. It doesn't really talk about the fall a whole lot, surprisingly, about how these films eventually just kind of wavered and sort of went away. And I mean, you could say it's more so obvious. You could say, well, people probably, you can't do this forever. But I think with how much time they spent on the actual like selection of films, and even a good amount of time on the rise of it, it would have been nice to kind of see the de-evolution and almost like where it is now, where it's like now you see a film with like Nazis and stuff, and or a historical film about Nazis, you'll see it as very dead serious, and you'll see it as and that makes sense. But then you also have like you could also say like you see films now and you have like movies like Green Room, where you have like a bunch of like skinhead Nazis like the bad guys. It's sort of like what makes these films kind of pop up into the general kind of consensus. I'm sure there's some stuff you can talk about there. But yeah, good documentary. Somebody actually recommended this to me a little while ago, and I saw it pop up. So I finally took the plunge on this and watched it. So I really like this one. Next another documentary that's worth next three documentaries right there that are worthy of your attention. Let me get a sip of this. My throat's a little dry, admittedly, so I'm trying to keep it keep the liquids going. Man, oh man, oh man. Whew, boy. I need to have like a separate list just of like documentaries, because there's always so many good ones I see and then I never end up bringing it up. Like I talked about Evocateur last time, maybe 2 times ago, I don't know, and that was just such a great documentary. I just love documentaries. I really can't get enough of them. Even the bad ones I end up enjoying for the most part. A lot of ones on Tubi that, are just very cheaply put together, almost kind of like YouTube videos, but I end up enjoying them as well. I love, like, watching a lot of them. That's why I just love Tubi so much. I just love the stuff that gets recommended to me. There's ones where I'm like, even if it's not good, I'm like, oh man, that just sounds so interesting. Like that one I was telling you guys about before. about the road safety films. I was like, my gosh, I would have never even imagined that somebody would have made a documentary about this. Oh, excuse me. And it was great. It was so fascinating, and it's also one of my favorite things I've watched this year. Trying to see what else I got here. I guess I can go into less step away from documentaries and more into a traditional sort of narrative film. I guess I can talk about this. Got a sip of this. We'll talk about it. I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about Pleasure 2021. Although I think this came out later, because I'm pretty sure I remember when this came out, and it's got a lot of talk. And I had finally seen it recently. Again, thanks to Tubi. We have now. I might mess the name up because the name is Ninja Thyberg, but that might. I don't know if that's actually pronounced like ninja, because the director is from Sweden. So I don't know if that name is accurate the way I am saying it. But she directs this film. She directed a short a couple years ago from 2013, I believe, also called Pleasure. And this is a really fascinating film because, I do peephole pictures. I'm interested in the golden age of porn. I'm really not interested at all in contemporary, the contemporary adult industry. It doesn't interest me. I've seen many, many documentaries about the contemporary adult industry, and I think my whole thing is that once the golden age was over, is where I kind of lost interest. In terms of like looking back on that retrospect, because obviously I'm born later, and I'm looking back on these films, and I can look at kind of the leftovers from that era, like the stuff that was going on in the 90s, but overall, in terms of like modern day, is not something I really follow through with or am terribly interested in. But we have this film. We have this actress Sophia Kappel, and she is, I don't forgot where she had come from originally, but because she's okay, also Swedish, I believe. Anyways, she comes to Los Angeles and she wants to be the next big kind of porn star, and from there we get the highs and lows of the industry, of the situation. And when I was hearing about this film beforehand, I knew there was some controversy behind the film. I knew that I didn't know until after the fact that I guess A24 were originally going to distribute it, but they wanted to cut down some of the more explicit parts, whereas the director did not want them to do that, so they dropped it, and I believe Neon distributed this. Which is funny to say because I don't think the film is very explicit at all. Now, I don't know if there is another cut of this film. I watched the one that was on Tubi, but it goes about as close as you can without having it be anything explicit on screen, because it's never unsimulated, it's never explicit. But it's also some of the controversy I was hearing about the film is that, so I knew that some of the majority of the cast are real adult film actors and actresses, and people who are involved with the industry. Like Axel Braun is somebody who I know does a lot of these adult parodies, these porn parodies, and he actually is in the film. And it's funny because when he popped up and he said who he was, I was like, is that really him? And I looked it up and it was him. But there was a lot of what I read where they were saying that they got taken advantage of, that this wasn't an accurate, they didn't get a whole idea of what the film was going to be, that it was a judgmental kind of look at the industry, and I honestly don't see it that way. To me, I mean, the plot is very light on the film. We just follow this character, Bella, going through wanting to be the next really big porn star, and a lot of the film feels very uncomfortable, very sleazy, but very honest as well, in a way that I have no reference for a lot of this. I don't really know much about the industry, the contemporary industry, but, I guess some parts she goes to like a convention and you just see like some of the guys there who, you kind of assume that maybe they're just real guys there, which is, again, also it's not judgmental, these people, it's just how it is. We have this one Asian character who I don't know who his name is, but he pops up in the film and he just looks like a regular guy. He looks like somebody who would be like probably in this situation. And a lot of the actors in this, I don't know exactly who they are. Again, I don't really follow any kind of contemporary actors or actresses, but as it's going, we're getting light plot. We're getting her being put in these situations, and it feels honest, a lot of it. Like, there's one part where she agrees, she wants her agent to hook her up with a more kind of rough scene. And during the scene, what happens is, she's in like one of these rough scenes, and two of the actors, they're being very kind to her. They're just saying like, hey, if you're ever, if you feel like you're getting a little overwhelmed, we just let us know. There's like a password and all that. So, she's doing the scene at first. She's trying to put on a brave face, but it's obviously, it's a very intense scene. And I just watched the documentary actually, and I wish I could remember the name of it, but it was about. Which is funny. I say I'm not interested in the contemporary industry, but here I am watching documentaries about it. I watch documentaries about a lot of stuff. There's just not a subject that I look a whole lot into. But anyway, so they're being very rough with her in the scene, and she's trying to put on a brave face. She's having trouble handling it. And the director is at first, he's kind of like, all right, well, let's take a break and we'll try again in a bit and all that. And so they tried again, and she really is like, this is just too much for me. This is really kind of, very uncomfortable. Even though you're just acting at the same time, you are getting dudes who are grabbing you and spitting in your face and all that. It's a very uncomfortable scene. But that documentary I was talking about, was about that the sort of like the contemporary era of a lot of these more kind of rough videos being put online. And the director in here is talking, and she's like, I really don't want to do this anymore. I want to go home. The director's being very well, this is what you signed up for, and you can't do anything with half a scene, and there goes money at the door, so you wasted everyone's time. Basically, just like making her feel bad, and from that documentary, that's what happens. It's sort of like these women be telling them that. They feel scared. They don't want to do this anymore, and it's like, yeah, you don't have to. Nobody's holding you against your will. But then at the same time, you have the director who's being very condescending, very manipulating, saying like, making them feel bad for not finishing the scene. You're wasting everyone's time. You're wasting their money. You wasted a whole day's shoot because you couldn't do it. And it's just very cruel. The way they do it. But it was also like, I like the following scene where she goes to the agent, and even the agent is saying like, well, this is what you wanted, so I don't know what you're talking about here. But really good performance from the lead here, from Sophia Kaplan. I don't know her background. This is the only thing I've seen her in. But she's really good in the film. And the film, it really kind of just drifts along in a way where it's not concerned about a giant plot. It's also not a lot of cliche in it, which was really nice. There's not like the stereotypical... There's not a lot of stereotypical characters in here. She's trying to climb the ladder in a way that feels very natural. It feels like she is really trying to put her body through these extremities. There's only one scene, I would say, at the end, which I think is a bit much for this kind of film, where the point is made, but it's an artistically directed sequence, and it's not bad, but I think, in the context of the rest of the film, I don't know, it feels a bit bigger than the rest of it. But the whole filming, you can tell they did a lot of research on the industry. Everything feels very honest. A lot of the dialogue, I really got to question how much of it is scripted, how much is actually just kind of like dialogue back and forth. Especially a lot of the adult actors in this, who I assume are probably they're just playing themselves. I don't know if they're playing themselves. They're playing very kind of like casual kind of laid back sort of people, and you kind of get the sense that there's not a lot of rehearsed dialogue going back and forth, unless it's all just really well rehearsed, and I could be wrong. But I really did like this film. This was one that I wish I had got to earlier, but I think initially some of the things I was hearing maybe like, I don't know if I want to say it or not, but I just happened to pop it on, and I was like, wow, this is actually a real, not even a surprise, because that would imply I was like gonna think it was worse, but really something that I liked quite a bit. So pleasure, and that'll be it for this episode, guys. So hey, you guys take care. The sun is down. This is perfect time to get some reading done, get some writing done, film watching, music listening, whatever it is, man. Just as long as you are leading your own life in the way you want to lead it, then you are on the right path, man. Do not compare yourself to others. Do not put yourself down because some days you're more productive than others. You're here, man. You're here to get the job done, and you're going to do great, man. You just really got to focus and stay at it. Not beat yourself up for every kind of crack you might have. Even Jesus dropped the cross a couple times. So It's all good, guys. You guys take care, and I'll be back next time. So thank you so much for listening.